This is Stephanie. I'm still dealing with tripod issues, so I do apologize for the ricketiness that is happening right now. I'm still using my dollar store tripod to record this. And I don't know if you can see behind me, but this is a pretty exciting moment. My dearest husband got me this really cool map of Shanghai, and it's all in Chinese. And so I'm working on the different location names, and so I can very soon, I'm sure, read a lot of this stuff. I can read some of it now because some of it's really easy, but I can read more of it coming very soon. So I'm super excited. Here's my goal, to be able to read the street signs here just in Chinese, not in the pinyin, not to rely on the pinyin. That's not what this video is about. This video is about the talking dog syndrome, and this is not specific just to Chinese. And I have to warn you that I normally don't talk about the frustrations of the cultural frustrations of speaking Chinese or trying to use Chinese in China. I normally deal with the frustrations in my head and the frustrations with my study patterns and the frustrations with my inability to understand and use the language in any way, shape, or form. But I am going to venture out of that today and talk about this thing that keeps happening, not just to me, but I keep hearing people at varying stages of being fluent in the Chinese language and their inability to get people to understand that they're speaking Chinese. So to intro this, or actually this almost is the full video because there's this adorable video that I saw on Instagram ages ago. I don't know how to link an Instagram photo over here because it wasn't linked anywhere else that's easy to link, so I'm just going to turn around the camera and play the video for you quickly that I found on Instagram, and then I will I'll come back and chat some more about this. But I think this really sums it up very well. Okay, we're gonna try to do this here, and let's see if I can work with my left hand. Sorry for the narrative, but here we go. Okay, and I don't fully understand the entire conversation that's happening there yet, but I do know that that little girl is speaking some really good freaking Chinese. So I suppose this video could also be something that I'm going to start soon, which is users of the language who might not be native speakers, but I don't know if this little girl is a native speaker or not. She might be. She's young enough that she might have started with Chinese and English bilingually or Chinese, because I'm assuming that one of her first languages is English, which is a bias that I'm somewhat making fun of, and not making fun of, pointing out in this video, but I also have. Because I'm looking at this little blonde girl and I'm going, well, of course, her first language is English. Why? There are blonde people all over the world whose first language is not English. So I myself have this bias that if you look at someone who is very, very pasty white with blonde hair, that of course they would be speaking English. She's not at all, any words at all in this video speaking English, right? She's speaking in Chinese. And she's basically saying, and Joni in Chinese is the Instagram, is the person, and that's her Instagram name, that posted this on Instagram. I'm saying Instagram like 600 times right now. And it's she posted, "How many times should I tell you that I am Chinese? Love this little girl." So I guess the girl's saying, I mean, I can hear 中国人. I can hear that when she's saying that. I recognize that that's Chinese person. 中国 is China, Ren is person. So I guess she's also saying in full form, how many times should I tell you that I am Chinese? So I'm guessing she was born and raised here and that Chinese is either her first language or one of her first languages. But because of how she looks, people obviously have a hard time understanding that she's Chinese. She must feel Chinese in her youngness and in her essence, and she grew up here and I'm projecting a little bit from what she's saying, but look at the frustrating look on the little girl's face. She's like, why do I have to keep explaining this? I'm explaining to you that I'm Chinese in Chinese, and I'm totally following what you're saying, and I'm responding back, and you're still looking at me like, but where are you from? Kind of thing. I'm guessing that's the conversation that keeps happening to this poor little girl who's just trying to live her little life, And this is just one example of what I've heard. Hold on, I have to mount this tripod now that I've shown you the video. This is frustrating. Oh my god, that's so much better. Okay. So this is one example of the narrative that I keep hearing again and again and again and again. And it's of people who know how to say certain things, or people that know how to say many things. Sorry, people who come from a language other than Chinese into Chinese and start to use Chinese. And I'm talking about mainland China, but I've heard it happen in other locations too. But I'm in mainland China, in Shanghai, so that's the experience I'm going to share. So they know what they're saying, they know what they're trying to convey, and people literally look at them and say to them, I don't speak English. Or you'll have to speak to me in Chinese, or something where they're not even registering that the Chinese language is being spoken. I've heard some of this happen, and although my ears are still very monolingual, it sounds like they're speaking tonal Chinese to the person, and I've heard them convert. I've heard these folks in different occasions. It's not just one occasion. I would never make this statement about one instance, because one instance could just be a quirky person who's just not willing to communicate for any number of reasons, and I could be that person on any given day. This is a repeated action. A repeated action, not just in the past. Oh, grammar joke, sorry. That probably wasn't very funny. So it happens again and again and again, and it sounds, and I've heard these people speak to, have entire conversations in Chinese, and then when they reach these certain people who refuse to get past the look of them and that they could be speaking Chinese, there's just this giant wall of no. I can't have this conversation, I don't speak English, even though there's no English being spoken. I have personally had this happen on a very minor scale, because again, for me right now, I'm mostly speaking in short phrases, street names, and very, very short sentences. So and I live in Shanghai, which is a first-tier city, and a lot of times when your Chinese is as bad as I am, it's easier for a lot of folks to switch into to English of any level, of any accuracy, of any whatever. It's easier for them to switch into that than to understand bad Chinese, which is what's coming out of my mouth. So with me, I'm more forgiving because I know how off my tones are at this point, and I know how off my grammar is at this point, because I'm doing more of looking at trends in grammar than studying grammar necessarily. So my word order is probably still really weird, and things like that. So for me, I'm very forgiving, but I keep hearing these stories of people, and I keep seeing people around me have these conversations where locals just shut down and say, no, I can't speak English, when the conversation is not happening in English. And I don't know. It's Year of the Dog, so it's rather funny that I'm doing a talking dog video during Year of the Dog. And I don't know why this happens so much in this region. Again, it's not just in China. I've heard stories of this happening in Korea. I'm not sure if it happens in Japan, but I've heard it happen in a variety of places in Asia. Now, I know that there's a history of isolation. There's various points in history of isolation within, if we talk about mainland China. I understand that. And I understand that coming from a Western context, the Chinese population in mainland China is very much so Han Chinese. What is it, 80% or something? Which is a really, really high percentage. And although there are dialectical differences, is that a word? That should be a word. Even though there are dialectical differences, there's definitely sound differences, even in the pinyin, in the tone, in the slurring, in the vocabulary. I mean, there's all kinds of differences within mainland China. For some reason, when you don't look Han Chinese, there's this shutdown of, you can't be speaking Chinese, you're not us. So it exists, and this isn't so much a judgment call as it's a statement and a partial frustration, because the more I do the listening and the sentence matching and the HSK tests, the more I realize I could speak in slightly longer sentences if I got my tones right. And I realize that it's coming, that as I'm studying for HSK1 and HSK2, I will have a lot more at my disposal, and I will meet this talking dog syndrome a lot more, and I'm not really looking forward to that. I know I could just study it, understand the listening, know that I could use the language if I wanted to, and I could just hold back and not use it. I spend the vast majority of my time in Tier 1 cities, so I could just choose not to. However, I'm a pretty talkative person, if you haven't noticed, and so I know that once I get the skill, I'm going to use it. It's not my long-term language learning goal, you know, that's reading, but it's going to happen, and so I know this is coming. I know I'm going to start having these conversations of, I can't understand you because you're speaking English, even though I'll be trying to speak in Chinese. So I know it's going to get more common for me personally, and I don't know, it's just frustrating. It's just super, super frustrating. And I agree with the perplexed look on this little girl's face. It's just like, why is this so hard? I'm speaking our language. Let's go. Let's just communicate. Why is there this shutdown moment? I don't know. It's hard coming from the West, shutting down when somebody from a different face starts speaking your language. I grew up with a different face than a lot of people around me in the US, so I don't know. I grew up in a very Pennsylvania Dutch, German, blonde hair, certain features kind of thing, and my parents came from Italy and not farther back from Albania, and I realize the longer I go on, I have a mix of Italian and Albanian facial features, but that was not normal where I grew up. So I was the one who didn't look similar. And actually, now that I think about it, I really wonder if people did a talking dog thing to my parents growing up, because they had pretty thick accents, especially when I was younger, and that kind of leveled off a bit, depending on the context, because accents come and go depending on context, right? So I really wonder if they reach some talking dog situations in that community too, because that was a relatively homogenous community, that small town I grew up in. So I wonder if they experienced some of this too. It's not just in Asia. It just, in Pennsylvania, once you went to a city, boom, it's gone. It's just gone. They were used to diversity. They were used to people of different faces talking different languages, and it just wasn't as strong. People were more used to, I don't even want to say tolerant, because tolerant implies having to put up with instead of just flowing with. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but you know what I mean? It's not just I'll deal with this because I have to. It's just a language and a face and a person, and we're just going to communicate, because communicating is what you do when you talk to someone. So I don't know if I've gone off a tangent here, but I know this is coming more and more for me the longer I study, especially the HSK stuff, which is longer chunks than I've studied before. So I know it's coming in bigger and bigger bits, and it's not encouraging at all that people that are at HSK 5 and 6 level keep telling me stories of, like, yesterday, the day before that, like very recently, them having these conversations where they literally had to pull over, like tug at their friend or their partner that was near them and say, could you just say it to them? Because they're not even listening to me. They don't even understand I'm speaking Chinese. Like, hearing those stories makes me sad, because then how am I going to use my language when I get to a point where I can use it in a way that would communicate something? I don't know. I'm guessing this will get less and less within mainland China as all of those young people who go overseas, young people, I sound so old, all those young people that go overseas and study in Australia and Canada and UK and the US and all that kind of thing, as they come back and become the older generation, I'm guessing this will get less, I think. Or will they just switch even more into English and not deal with it? How do people who don't speak English switch into some other language when they can't be understood in Chinese? That's something I can't even fathom. Because I do have that crutch. So I can I do switch over to English, especially right now with my low language level. But for folks who come in and know only their first language and Chinese, or their first language and Chinese were their first language, and then they come over and people switch into English and they're like, I don't know English. What do you do? That would be an interesting thing to find. I don't know how I would find that information because I don't have a second language that I can see of those people. If they were to put that information online, I can't read or watch those videos. So there's that. So the talking dog syndrome is real and it's going to be more prevalent. And so if I start to do videos on it, I'll try to keep it to a minimum because I do want this channel to be more about the studying process than the cultural frustrations. Because I don't think it's not just in China, it's just pretty intense here sometimes, especially with the older generation that really, really didn't see many foreign faces until very recently. So yeah, there's that. So there you go, talking dog syndrome. I don't know if I want to invite comments and feedback, but I'm not closing off comments and feedback. I know it's coming. And, you might as well share your stories on if you've experienced this. Have you figured out any way to work around it? I don't know. Do you notice it with a specific age group? I don't know. If you can, share something positive about it, but I suppose I've kind of set this up as a venting session, so we'll just see where it goes. Yeah. Okay, so thank you, and Sachian.